Okay. So in the last session, we have seen the networking, right? The IP addressing part. Like we have learned like what is a network. Especially we focused on the IP addressing. Okay. So in this session, let's talk about virtual private cloud, which is a VPC. Whenever we created the EC2 instances or a load balancer or something, let us take the example of the EC2 instance. Whenever we create the EC2 instance, that is available in the cloud, which means somewhere across the globe. And that has to be accessible for the users and even for the managers. Manager in the sense, whoever is going to maintain that particular EC2 instance. And for that communication, the device, the instance must be in a network, right? So coming to this VPC, VPC is the virtual network in the AWS cloud. VPC or a virtual private cloud, right? The full form is virtual private cloud. VPC is a virtual network in the cloud. So whatever the instances we create, that must be connected in network. And that network is nothing but the VPC. But as of now, it's been like 30 days or so, right? Almost 1 month. But we never created a VPC for our EC2 instances and all. The reason is by default, AWS provides a default VPC in each region. One default VPC in each region. That is what we have used till now. Sometimes we might need to create a customized network. If you observe in the default VPC, sorry, in the default VPC, VPC is the network, right? The default VPC or in any VPC, VPC is a network in which we can create subnets also. We can create subnets also. What is the meaning of a subnet? Subnet is nothing but a small portion in the network. Subnet is a small part of the network. Like, let us say if you have a house in which you are having 4 different rooms, that entire house is divided into smaller rooms, right? Why? Each room is for a specific purpose, like kitchen for cooking, living room, dining room, bedroom, guest room, right? We have the entire building, the entire house has been divided into smaller parts, and each part is for a specific use case. The same way, subnets can be created. We can create as many subnets as you want. Subnet is a small part of the given network. And by default, I said a default VPC is available, right? In default VPC, how many subnets we get? In default VPC, we get the subnets equal to the number of availability zones in that region. What does that mean is in Northern Virginia, we get 6 subnets in default VPC. And in Hyderabad region, we get 3 subnets in default VPC. Why? In Hyderabad, we have 3 availability zones. And all the subnets, each subnet spread across one availability zone. Each subnet spread across one availability zone. And we have different types of subnets. We have different types of subnets, 2 types of subnets. That is for as per our requirement. We can create 2 types of subnets. One is a public subnet, and the second one is a private subnet. What does that mean by public subnet? Any guess what might be the public subnet? So public subnet is the subnet in which all the instances can get a public IP address so that the public subnet instances can be accessible from anywhere across the globe. Anywhere we can access those public subnet instances. Whereas the private subnet, I will keep some space because we need to add some few more points. Private subnet. What is a private subnet? Based on that, you can say the instances cannot get a public IP, which means those instances are not accessible from outside of the network. I think if you recollect, the private IP address is only for internal communication. You cannot establish or you cannot communicate from outside of the network. So the private subnet is the subnet in which the instances can get only private IP address. Only private IP address, which means those private subnet instances cannot be accessible from outside of the VPC. They are only accessible within the VPC. What is the use case? Can you guess what might be the reasons for public subnet and all? Like websites, web servers, which means the instances which should be publicly accessible. That is a requirement. And here, private subnet instances use case, the best example is to host a databases. Means if you see Amazon online store, they maintain a huge databases, right? But we never connect to the database directly from your laptop or somewhere, right? The database is connected to the web server, which is in the public subnet, and we are communicating with the public subnet machine, which is a web server. So to maintain the databases, always it is recommended to use a private subnet. How the public subnet or private subnets can be created? Do you think there is an option to select public subnet or private subnet? There is no such option. There is no such option. That we will understand at the time of discussing the components of the VPC. Let me list out the basic components available on the VPC. Then we will talk about each and every component. So first one is a network. The next one is a subnet in which we get a public subnet and then a private subnet, right? And we have something called internet gateway, which is also known as IGW, public subnet, private subnet. Then a route tables in which we get a routes. Within the route tables, we will get a routes. Then network address translation, in which we need to create NAT gateway. Earlier, we used to have a NAT instance also, but now that is not available or not recommended. Network address translation, then NACL, or I can say network ACL, which is also known as NACL, then VPC peering. These are the things which we must know. Without knowing all these things, you can't understand the what we call that the VPC concept. Okay, right. So first thing, network or a VPC, both are same. Network is nothing but a virtual network in the cloud, which is also known as a VPC. So VPC, already I mentioned, right? VPC is the virtual network in the cloud. Then internet gateway, IGW, right? Internet gateway. Okay, here let me show you the things easily. So assume this is going to be the VPC. Okay, this is going to be the VPC network. And I would like to give a name to this network, virtual, sorry, my first VPC. And whenever you create a network, you must assign a network range and a CIDR range for the network. I would like to choose 192.168.0.0/16. Let me increase the font size. This is my network ID. So in my VPC, in my network, whatever the machines I create, those machines will have an IP address starts with 192.168. This is 0 and 0 can be anything, right? Okay. Now coming to the internet gateway, what is the meaning of a gateway? An entry point, right? So internet gateway is responsible for connecting your network with the internet. So this I will call it as internet gateway, which is available in front of your VPC. There's a kind of an entry point. Internet gateway is a gateway which will connect your VPC with internet, your network with the internet. Whenever you are downloading something or you are uploading something from the network, that will go through the internet gateway. So here I will write down like IGW is the gateway which connects the VPC with the internet. In other words, we can say internet gateway is responsible to provide connectivity with the internet. Without an internet gateway, you cannot get internet into your network. That is a simple thing you should remember. Okay, to get more internet speed or something, can I use multiple internet gateways? Can I use multiple internet gateways so that my VPC will get more internet bandwidth or more speed? No. Each VPC can have only one internet gateway. Means you cannot attach multiple internet gateways to a single VPC. Because few people might think, okay, if I use multiple internet gateways, I will get more internet. No, that's not possible. For a single network, only you will have one internet gateway, right? Okay, then the subnets. Then the subnets. What is a subnet? Subnet is a small portion of the network, right? Subnet. So subnet is the small part of the network, which means we can split or we can create multiple subnets in the VPC as per our requirement. What is the requirement? One subnet for database servers, one subnet for production servers, or one subnet for just like what we call the proxy servers, one subnet for data only to store the data. Use case can be anything. Okay. And in these subnets, we have a public and private subnets, which already we discussed, right? And on what basis a subnet becomes a public subnet? To understand that, we need to know about route table. Let me show you here. Where exactly the subnet? So here, this is going to be one subnet, a small portion. The name is going to be, I will use it as a public subnet. And this must have a pub range. I will give 192.168.1.0/24. What does that mean? My VPC will have a network ID of 192.168.0.0. Means in the entire network, the IP addresses should start with 192.168. But in my public subnet, my IP addresses must start with 192.168.1. Each subnet act as a different subnet. Each subnet act as an individual subnet. Let me show you. So here, this is going to be a private subnet. 192.168.2.0/24. Let me explain this in the easy way. Okay, if I gave you a range from 1 to 100, or so this is a range which indicates 1 to 100. I asked you to divide this 1 to 100 into 10 parts. No need of like equal parts. So 1, 2, 3, 3, like this, right? Then I can say this is like 1 to 20, 21 to 25, 26 to 40, 41 to 90, 91 to 92, 93 to 95, 95 to 96, 97 to 98, just 99, 100. Like this, I divided. Is it correct or not? If you see, assume this is the network. Whatever the computers you connect in this particular block, they should get a number from 1 to 20 only. And that 1 to 20 belong to 1 to 100. Here 21, 22, 23, 24. That also belongs to this. This is a main network in which we divide into smaller portions. So all portions contains 1 to 100 only. The same way here, all IP addresses must start with 192 dot 192.168 dot something, right? If you see this 192.168.1, which belongs to the same network, which belongs to the same VPC, and here 192.168.2.0, which belongs to the same main network. That's how these can be divided. Like if you want to create one more subnet, that is going to be 192.168.3.0, 4.0, 5.0, and so on. And every subnet must be connected with a route table. Must be connected with a route table. So what is a route table? It's a kind of a Google Maps application in your mobile. That's a kind of a Google Maps application in your mobile phone. What does that mean? All the communication is because of that route table. I will say this as a public RT, which means public route table, just a name. Even you can give ABC, XYZ, that doesn't matter. Okay, right. So then the next thing, it separates route table, which I name it as private RT. Whenever you create a route table, that route tables will have a route. Each route table will have a route. And by default, every route table will get a default route. What is the default route? Let me show you here. Default route is, it contains two components. One is target and the second one is a destination. It contains two components. So here, one 192.168.0.0. I mean your VPC range. Local. This is how the route looks like. So here it is going to be the destination. And this is the target. The same way you will get a route here also. The same way you will get a route here also. The first component is the destination. 192.168.0.0/16, which is your VPC, right? Which is your VPC, like this. And all will be connected with subnet must be connected. And obviously, what is the meaning of the default route is they are connected. Okay. What is the meaning of this? If the destination, okay, let me show you more clear. Let us say this is the computer one. The IP address is 192.168.1.11. Okay. Or 192.168.1.11 is the IP address of this machine. And here we have another machine in the private subnet. One 192.168.2.11. Okay, this is going to be server 11, and this is server 1. Now, whenever you try to access, I logged in to this computer. I logged into this computer and I am trying to log into server 11. What I do, I will enter the IP address of the server 11. So what happens? First, it will go to the route table. In the route table, it will check the routes. Routes are the maps, path, how to reach the destination. Here, what is the route? 192.168.0.0/16. Does this IP 192.168.2.11 is the destination? Does this belong to this range? Yes. So what is the target local? Means it is saying that your destination is available within the VPC itself and use the local path to reach that destination. And if from the server 1, if I type google.com, let us say google.com's IP address is 1.2.3.4. Just example. It go to the public route table. First, we'll go for the first route 192.168.0.0/16, and the destination doesn't belong to this part. It go for the next route where there is no routes, and the route table is unable to take the server 1 to the google.com. So here, how this public route table, or how we can say the public route or public subnet is, if the route table of the public subnet contains an additional path 0.0.0.0/0 through internet gateway, then that route table becomes a public route table and the associated subnet becomes a public subnet. That's why in the private route table, we will never create a route through internet gateway. Okay, right. So here, let me write down few points. Route table. Route table contains the routes, or I can say first route table is responsible for the communication and it contains routes. Whenever we create a route table, it contains a default route which allows communication between all subnets within the VPC network. Between all subnets within the VPC network. And with this configuration, with the default route only, the route table acts as a private route table. So to make the route table as a public route table, so here okay, to make the route table as a public route table, we need to create an additional route through internet gateway as a below. how it contains two components, destination and a target. Before that, how the default route looks like. So destination and a target, right? Destination and a target, which contains 192.168.0.0/16. Target is going to be local. This is the default route. This is a default route. Now, to make that route table as a public route table, we need to create an extra route 0.0.0.0/0 through internet gateway. I will say additional route. With the additional route, the route table becomes public route table and associated subnets becomes public subnets. Okay, now coming to our default VPC, it might have a route table, right? And we have a subnets also. Can you guess, are those a public subnets or a private subnets? In the default VPC, whatever the subnets we used, are they public subnets or a private subnets? Can you guess? Because we never created or we never modified anything in the route tables, right? Without modifying, our machines are accessible, which means by default, all the subnets, the default VPC are public subnets. Okay. Whenever we create a default route table will be created, like whenever we create a VPC, custom VPC, automatically a default route table will be created, which is known as a main route table. So here I will write down a note point. With the creation of a new VPC, a default route table will be created and is known as main route table. Known as main route table. It might be an interview point of question, main route table. And the main route table is a private route table. That is going to be a private route table. Okay, whatever the components we discussed, using those components, let's create the network, right? And here, this is what we covered, right? Let us create this. Let us create one EC2 instance in the public subnet, one EC2 instance in the private subnet also. So are you guys clear as of now or any questions? Any questions or any confusions with the points what we covered? Because this is going to be the most important topic. Okay, now let us go with some simple VPC creation. I will say create a VPC. I will name it as my first VPC in Northern Virginia region. Northern Virginia region with the below requirements. What all? So VPC CIDR range 192.168.0.0/16 VPC CIDR range. And I need two networks. Public subnet is going to be 192.168.1.0/24. Private subnet 192.168.2.0/24. Obviously, route for public subnet, we need to create a route table. Private subnet, we need to create a route table. Right? Then, okay, that we will see next. Okay, let us go with this creation. So what all we have to do is, first thing, create a VPC and name it as my first VPC and assign the CIDR range 192.168.0.0/16. This is the first step. Okay. Then create an internet gateway, and attach it to the VPC. We must attach it because if you create it, Amazon don't know that for which VPC you created the internet gateway. We need to manually attach it. Then create a subnet and name it as public subnet with a CIDR range 192.168.1.0. And again, remember, if I give the name as a public subnet, it won't become a public subnet. Okay, right. Then create a route table and name it as public RT. Again, if I name it as a public RT, it won't become a public route table. Okay, name it as a public RT and observe the default route, because by default, the default route will be available. Observe it. Then create an additional route in public RT as below to make it as a public. 0.0.0.0/0 IGW. This is going to be additional route. Okay. Then what is the next step? Associate the public RT route table with, or we should say, yeah, associate the public RT route table with the subnet public subnet. Then the subnet becomes a public subnet. Then the next one, create a subnet and name it as private subnet with a CIDR range 192.168.2.0/24. Okay, here few note points. By default, newly created subnet is associated with main route table, which acts as private route table. So if the subnet, if you want the subnet to be a private subnet, you can keep that main route table for that newly created private subnet, or else you can create another route table and you can name it as a private RT, and don't create any additional routes. If you create an additional route through the internet gateway, you can like what we call that route table becomes a public route table. So here, note point, what is the next note point is we can keep the private subnet associated with the main route table. No need to create an additional route table and all. So in all these things, whatever the components we are going to create, those are going to be of no cost. These are a lot of free of things. No need to create. You are not chargeable. Okay, you will not be chargeable for creating these components. Whenever there is a chargeable component, I will let you know. Okay, right. Any questions on like what exactly we are going to create? So let us proceed with the creation of our first VPC. So first, let us just give me a second, because let me check if there is any VPC already exists with the name my first VPC. Then I will delete that. Okay, not available. Okay. So first, what you have to do is in the search box, type VPC and click on VPC so that you will be navigated to the VPC service. This is the dashboard. right? On the left side, you can see one option called your VPCs. How many VPCs are there? Only one VPC is available, right? And this is the VPC ID. Is this the default VPC or what exactly it is? How to know that is, if I scroll aside, you can see the default VPC. Yes, means this is the default VPC created by Amazon at the time of account creation. Okay, right. So now if I go to the subnets here, I'm not creating anything, just I'm showing the existing one. How many subnets are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All 6 subnets are associated with the same VPC, and the VPC ID ends with 7679. And you can see CIDR ranges. They used /20. We are going to use /24. That's your requirement. That's your choice. If you choose /20, you will get 4091 IP addresses. In which region? 1E, 1C, 1F, 1D, 1B, 1A. Each subnet is in one availability zone. Are these default subnets? Yes. Okay, then let me go to the route tables. There is one route table, right? What it is? Main route table of the default VPC. Okay, so here, if you select it, there are multiple options, right? If I click on routes, can you see an additional route? Target is Internet Gateway, IGW. That's because this route table is a public route table. And if I click on subnet associations, you can see all subnets associated with the same route table. That is also possible, but you cannot associate a subnet with multiple route tables, but you can have multiple subnets with a single route table. Okay. So now what we have to do is we need to create the VPC, right? So here, go to your VPCs and click on create VPC. There are two different options, but at the initial stages, I recommend to use VPC only so that everything we will create manually. If I choose VPC and more, automatically everything will be created. See here, I will choose a range and I will select everything here like this. See, VPC, subnets, two subnets, route table, network connections, everything will be automatically created. So we can't understand it, right? So initial days, let's go with VPC only. So every component we will create one by one manual. Name of the VPC, my first VPC, my first VPC, IP address range. What is the CIDR range of the IP address VPC? 192.168.00/16. I don't need any IP version 6. If you need IP version 6 also, you can choose here. Click on create code. The default VPC got created, right? Okay. Now, if I go to subnets, is there any additional subnets created by default? No, you can see only the previous 6. If I go to route tables, let me do a refresh. Can you see an extra route table? Yes. So which route table belongs to which VPC? That you can see here. This is the my first VPC route table, which is yes, which is a main. And if you observe, go to the routes, only one route. That's why the main route table act as a private route table. Okay, right. Now, if I go to the internet gateways, how many internet gateways are there? Only one internet gateway, which belongs to default VPC. What is the next step? Create an internet gateway. Just click on create internet gateway. So here I will say my first VPC-IGW. So I will use a meaningful name so that by seeing the name itself, I can identify, okay, this internet gateway is for my first VPC. Click on create internet gateway. Done. Let me go back to the internet gateways and see a new internet gateway got created. What is the state? Detached. It is not attached with any VPC. Right now we have a two VPCs, right? Okay, let us attach to one VPC. Select it, actions, attach to VPC. Click here, but it is only showing one VPC. Why? The reason is the other VPC is already having the internet gateway. Just I'm trying to show you that you cannot attach multiple internet gateways to a single VPC. Whatever the VPCs available without internet gateway, only that list is available here. Let me choose my first VPC and click on attach internet gateway. Done. Let me go back to the internet gateways. Just do a quick refresh here. See, my first VPC, sorry, yeah, internet gateway is attached with my first VPC. That ends with 0419. That is the ID of the VPC. What is the next one? Create a subnet, and we are going to use that subnet as a public subnet. How to do that? Just click on subnets here, create subnet. We have a two VPCs. In which VPC we are going to create the subnet? My first VPC. Select my first VPC. So it is showing what is the my first VPC CIDR range. Subnet name, public subnet. In which availability zone you would like to create? I would like to create in 1A availability zone. 1A availability zone. What is the CIDR range of this public subnet? What will happen if I say like this? 10.0.1.0, which is not belong to main network, right? What happened? CIDR address is not within the CIDR address form from VPC. Means if I ask you to choose between 1 to 100, and if you are choosing 529, then that's what exactly happened. So in the VPC, every IP address must start with 192.168. Then I will use 1.0/24. Click on create subnet. The subnet got created. Just name is a public subnet, but it is not an actual public subnet. For that, what we have to do, we need to create a route table called a public RT. How to here choose route tables? Click on create route table. In which VPC this route table to be created? Select my first VPC, create route table, and done. But how many routes are there? Only one route. Target is local. But this route table act as a private route table. How? Just we go back to the routes. This is our public route RT, which we created just now. Click it, routes. I will add an extra route, edit route, add route. This is going to be 0000 as a destination. Target, see here, internet gateway. Again, click here and choose my first VPC-IGW. Now save changes. Now this route table becomes the public route table. And then what should happen? That subnet must be associated with this route table. How? Click on subnet associations, edit subnet associations, select the public subnet and save associations. Means the public subnet is associated with the public route table. Up to here, we are done. Now we need to create a private subnet. Subnets, create subnet, choose the VPC, subnet name, private subnet. Availability zone, you can choose 1A or you can choose 1B, that doesn't matter. 192.168.2.0/24. Create subnet. The subnet got created. So we got two subnets also. One is in public subnet, one is going to be the private subnet. And this private subnet, with which route table it is associated, that you can check. Select the subnet. Here, route table. With which route table? Ends with 04B84. Let me go to the route tables. 04B84. This is the one, which is main route table, private route. Subnet associations, you can see. Private subnet is associated with the main route table. You cannot create a subnet across multiple availability zones. If you want to try, you can click on create subnet. First VPC. Let me say test one. Availability zone. Only one you can select. You can't select multiple. Like you can't be in two different places at a time, right? The same way. Subnet belongs to single availability zone. Okay, right. So now create two Windows EC2 instances in each subnet of my first VPC. Then log into public subnet and private subnet EC2 instances. Okay, right. So here, I think everybody knows like how to launch EC2 instances, right? The same way, but while creating, you need to choose the VPC. But before that, we need to do some modification here, like subnet. I don't change, just I will show you. If you want, you can modify it. So if you choose the public subnet, actions, edit subnet settings. What is the auto assign IP setting? Not enabled, right? Means by default, this option is not enabled on any subnet. We need to manually enable, or at the time of creation, we can choose it. I am not enabling it. Auto assign public IP address is not enabled by default on any subnet. Okay, now let us create the EC2 instances. How to create? Go to instances, launch instances. The same way, I will name it as a server one. I will choose a Windows because it is easy graphical user interface. And T3.micro, wait, let me choose a Windows. Okay, 2022, that's okay. T2.micro, key pair, you can choose the key pair, network settings. If I click on edit, by default VPC got selected. Now I will choose my first VPC. In which subnet you would like to create? In the public subnet. Earlier, I showed you one option, right? Auto assign public. Let me show you again. Auto assign IP settings. Enable is not enabled, right? That's because of that option, auto assign public IP is disabled. So at the time of creating the EC2 instance, you need to manually enable here. Or else you can enable here so that no need to manually change this from disabled to enable. Okay. Now, do I need to create a security group, or can I choose from existing security group? What is showing? It is not showing any security groups. It is only showing the default. But we remember that we created many security groups: Windows RDP, Linux SSH, HTTP, HTTPS, HTTPS, right? What happened to those security groups? Do you think I deleted? No, I never deleted them. Then what happened? The reason is security groups are network specific, means security groups are a VPC specific. See, can you see all the security groups? But all these security groups belongs to a single VPC which ends with 79. So there's a new VPC and you need to create a security group. I will say Windows RTP. Launch instance. So as per this image, server 1 is getting created. Let me create server 11 in the private sub. Okay. And generally in the public subnet, if you want, you can enable this one. Enable auto assign public IP address. Because of that setting, the advantage is at the time of creation, sometimes we might forget to make that enable, right? That is the only advantage. Okay, so now let me click on launch instances. Another new instance, server 11. Server 11. Okay, browse more AMIs. Okay, let me choose Windows Server 2022, t2.micro, key pair. Okay. If you observe, what are the key pair we created earlier, that key pair we are using, which means the key pair is not a network specific. In that region, you can use the key pair with any VPC. Okay, edit. My first VPC, private subnet. At this stage, few people might think if I choose enable, do I get a public IP? Even if you get a public IP, it won't work. Like you have a laptop and you don't have internet connection and you assign a public IP to your laptop. Do you get internet? No, it requires a lot of routes and all. Okay, select existing security group. Let me choose Windows RDP and click on launch instance. Log into public subnet and private subnet EC2 instances. But for private subnet instance, we don't get any public IP address. Then how can we log in? That also we will see. Not today, but that we will see. First, let me show you the server one is in the public subnet. Here is the public IP, right? Let me get the password. RTP client, get password. Let me upload the private key file. That is on the desktop. Key pair. This is the one. Decrypt. Here is the password. I got the password. Now let me log in. Here is the public IP. Remote desktop connection 44.223.70.1. If you got this window means your request is received by the EC2 instance. Administrator password. See here, we are able to log in to the server one, which is in the public subnet with the help of a public IP. But coming to the server level, which is in the private subnet, it doesn't have any public IP. It's having only the private IP. With the private IP, we cannot communicate across multiple networks. My laptop is in one network, that is in a different Amazon's VPC network. So let me minimize this. So if you see the server 11, you don't have a public IP. Even if you assign a public IP, it won't work because it is not connected with internet gateway. Okay, now let me use the private IP to log in. What is the IP? 192.168.2.187. So it will try to reach the private IP. If that private IP is available in my local network, my machine will be connected to that machine. But here there is no machine with that IP in my home network, right? So it will fail. See here. So how to access this private subnet machine? There are multiple ways. One is a VPN, but at this point we don't go through the VPN part. There is another way called Bastion host. There is another way called Bastion host, which we will discuss in the next session. Like what is a Bastion host and how we use Bastion host to log in to private subnet instances and all the things. Once we're done with the Bastion host, then at the end of the VPC topic, we will see the VPN part also, like how to set up our own VPN server. There are some open source VPN server services available, right? We will set up those things also. This is the server one. Let me close it. Okay. So any questions on the topics what we covered in the today's session? Any questions?